In a shocking twist, the same media that told you the 2020 election was fair withheld Joe Biden's decline and cancer diagnosis in the lead up to 2024.
Now, look, if you're in our audience or anything like us, none of this is surprising to you. But even you might be surprised, might be shocked even to see how deep the autopen rabbit hole goes.
Congress actually did something good for once. Trump's big, beautiful bill has made it past the House Budget Committee.
But Republicans will continue to Republicant, as a group of them could tank the whole thing.
Meanwhile, Democrats continue to blame their 2024 loss on Joe Biden and not the fact that they backed the wrong side of every 90-10 issue.
Meanwhile, our friend Terry Schilling will break down how Trump took back the narrative and beat them.
Tonight's episode has Biden autopen seal of approval. Blaze News, the mandate starts right now. Good evening, Patriots. I'm Jill Savage, joined, as always, with the fearless wordsmith, Blaze News Editor-in-Chief, Matthew Peterson.
Thank you, Jill. It's great to be here, and welcome back to you. Since you've been gone, gosh, a lot's happened, you know? You leave for a couple days, and the whole world changes.
It certainly does. We have the long-anticipated Biden-Hur tapes that were released back on Friday. And coincidence or not, the auto emerged from Axios, whose reporter Alex Thompson, along with CNN's Jake Tapper, is releasing a new book this week detailing how Biden's inner circle allegedly concealed his cognitive decline from the public. Now, throughout Hur's interview back in October of 2023, President Biden then fumbled for words. He failed to recall both basic and important dates.
So during this time, we were living in Chambers Road, and there were documents related to the Penn Biden Center or the Biden or the cancer booster shot or your book. Where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so what was happening though, what month did Bo die? May 30th, 2015. 2015 he died?
May 2015.
I think it's 2015.
I'm not sure the months are, but I think that was
Yeah.
That's right, Mr. President.
And what's happened in the meantime is that Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right. So, why do I have 2017 here?
That's when you left office, January of 2017.
Okay.
I can't handle the truth in this instance. It is very difficult to listen to any of that without becoming stark raving mad. And of course, the question here is, why are these tapes finally being published now? Of course, not only does Axios' Alex Thompson have a book to sell, but over the weekend, Biden's team also announced, on top of all of this, after the whole nation realizes for real, even the most normie con that he was obviously senile for a long time. Now we learn that he's suffering from an aggressive form of prostate cancer.
And the mainstream media is going to do what they do. They're going to do the whole cover up, but then now it's all unraveling because they want to be known as on the right side of history. Now, his mental struggles are confirmed in the Hur tapes and numerous book releases. And top oncologist, we have Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, who once worked for President Joe Biden, made some startling claims today on MSNBC's Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough.
This is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you are saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
So there's no disagreement. Well, Biden himself might have spilled the beans on his cancer diagnosis all the way back in July of 2022.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
So here's what's clear. A lot of you already knew this, but millions more people are learning it every day. It appears the country had been running without a president for the past 4 years. One person we wanted to bring in today with further insight into this is our friend and now Blaze News contributor, Oversight Project President Mike Howell. So, Mike, welcome. There's a lot to talk about today, but let's just start with who or what was the power behind the bureaucratic state making decisions for Biden. We'll get into how this happened, but do you have any insight into who these people were who were running things?
Yeah, I certainly have my suspicions. And one of the first people that Chairman Comer, when he announced they're actually going to subpoena some individuals to come in to testify about it all, is Neera Tanden. She was the staff secretary, basically the one who controlled all of the paper. Recall famously, she comes from Soros world, and they wanted her to be the OMB director, but she was mean to Bernie Sanders on Twitter, so she didn't get that job. But she seems to be the paperwork czar. There are a couple other names that Comer has highlighted. I think there's going to be gradations of people. I don't think it's going to be one. I think it's basically a committee of certain influences and special interest. I think Obama world had a profound outsized impact on it. And when you look at some of his top surrogates, I think you'll see names like Susan Rice and Eric Holder. Obviously, the Biden family had a lot of play. I think Jill and Hunter were still affecting a lot of the decision making. And so there's a lot to learn, but we only learn it after people get prosecuted for these crimes.
So you and Oversight Project were the first ones to shed light on the autopen scandal. So take us through the latest in where that stands now.
So last summer, we basically realized, hey, all these documents that Biden's purporting to sign look a little goofy. And so we pulled them all and figured out, oh, they're using an autopen, or at least, two variations of an autopen for simply like copying and pasting the same signature. We put that out there. President Trump reacted to it a couple months ago and said the pardons are null and void. Since then, Ed Martin said DOJ is looking into it. He's now the pardon attorney, so he's looking into it. President Trump said once again that the pardons are null and void, just a couple days ago. So the question is, and the recommendations we gave, Congress needs to subpoena these people to build out the evidentiary record, and that can only be done with compulsory process. Second to that, President Trump and his DOJ should criminally charge the people who received the pardons. Think of Jim Biden, who got one of the autopen pardons on the last day, Adam Schiff, Anthony Fauci. Those people should be charged, and those pardons should be tested. Now, we're going to keep putting out the investigative material that sparked all this that everyone's acting on, but ultimately that's what needs to happen to really answer the question and impose accountability.
Well, I hope, given what's been, given these revelations, given this interview, and given all the press, that this is just accelerates the process, that people are actually held accountable. What's remarkable to me right now is that, and it's easy to get jaded. It's easy for myself to get jaded. Jill, all of us, God bless us here. We've been watching this in real time going, I can't believe we have a president who's not really there, right? But for a lot of people who don't pay as much attention or just, are living their lives, they assume, it's probably exaggerated political propaganda. At this point, I do feel like millions of Americans this week are increasingly going, what the hell happened? Do you think that's right? And what could that do to bring about justice?
I think that's right, but there's a danger in this specific time. We're basically seeing a controlled demolition of the Bidens, and we're seeing a public kayfabe confessional ritual, whatever you want to call it, where, you know, with the audio tape coming out, with the White House rewarding Axios and Jake Tapper with that tape so they could sell their book, this is the time frame for people to come forward and be like, oh, he was bad, we should never do that again, and then move on. And so I worry that this could be the end of the conversation unless we pursue the lines of accountability that need to be had. Because people were seriously hurt by what the Biden White House did, whether it's people who went to jail, who had their financial lives ruined, whether it's those who have been killed by the hordes of illegals they invited over the border, whether it's the people who are the victims of the lawfare. To have accountability and to make those victims whole, we need to know who was actually running the White House and calling the shots and, you know, committing the crimes. And that's where this goes. And that's why it's so dangerous and profoundly dumb that Axios was giving the tape for a controlled demolition late on a Friday night, where they deceptively edited the tapes to give the Biden camp a talking point of, hey, the tapes aren't that bad. Look, even Axios deceptively edited them. And all this controlled demolition was planned months ago. Tapper's book, who's getting rich off this, by the way, with the, you know, frankly, the support of the White House, was scheduled as soon as we got the court to pick May 20th as the deadline for release of these tapes. So there's a lot of things happening at the same time, but all of it really relates to this controlled demolition period, and we can't let this be the end, and the Oversight Project won't. That's why we're saying what we're saying and doing what we're doing.
So let's drill into that real quick. I mean, controlled demolition. So what you're saying, check me if I'm wrong here. You're saying, look, Tapper's going to come out with this book admitting that they covered up Biden's senility or dementia, or whatever you want to say, and that they planned to release this tape before it was forced to come out, and they deceptively edited it, and that's what everyone's talking about now.
That's absolutely right. You're living through a very coordinated comm strategy that ultimately benefits Biden. And the cancer diagnosis announcement on Sunday, come on, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. Like, the guy who's lied the most and his family in the history of American politics finally admits something was wrong. No, that you're living through a comm strategy executed to sell books, and unfortunately assisted by the White House. I don't think with intent, but it has that end impact that they put the ball into Axios and Jake Tapper's hands, and they're the ones kind of controlling this kayfabe public confessional period where Democrats will be able to rebrand themselves and put this all behind them. And that's the whole purpose of this book, the rollout and the controlled demolition.
Yeah, it's PR 101, right? When you have these Google searches out there, when you search Joe Biden, they don't want this coming up, this topic that we're talking about. So they're saying, oh, you know what? We're just going to release that he has cancer. We've known it the whole time, but now we're all willing to say it. Let's go ahead and listen. We have Representative James Comer. He's talking about, they think that they know some of the staffers that are involved in the autopen scandal. Let's go ahead and watch.
But many of the executive orders that the courts are now using to Trump-proof many of the executive orders that President Trump is trying to implement to make government more efficient, many of these executive orders, as well as the pardons of Biden's entire family as a result of our investigation, these were all signed with the autopen. And clearly from that interview, which was many, many months prior to the heavy use of the autopen, Joe Biden wasn't capable of making decisions.
It's interesting to see the use of the autopen and the fact that it is making its way now to the representatives, that they're all talking about this, the fact that it's all coming out right now. How do you go and speak on just the fact that Trump is going back and talking about this right now, and also that it's going to be out here amongst all the representatives now?
Yeah, I think a lot of credit goes to you guys and others who we pushed through the legacy media narrative bubble and the control mechanisms. Autopen went absolutely viral because it showed simply how they executed a White House without a president. And then it got to President Trump, who saw it for what it was and put out the green light to not only his DOJ to charge them, but to Congress to investigate. And so we went around legacy institutions. And in terms of how the investigation continues, we, of course, are staying on it, providing the right people with the names of who to look at. And it's going to be multifold right now. Ed Martin, as pardon attorney, is going to be all over it. Congress obviously has a role to play. We've had a very strong relationship with Comer. We think him and his team are the best at what they do, even given the limitations of what Congress, both can and should do. And so we're just going to keep it alive. And it's really a very civically motivated investigation because people are furious. They want answers. And the autopen as a symbol of an actual device and instrument of how they executed the plan makes a lot of sense to a lot of people because it's simply what they did to get around the fact that they had a senile and incapacitated president. And so this isn't going anywhere. Joe Biden will forever be known as the autopen president.
I hope so, Mike. When you think about this, this is a difficult moment, like you said, because of the controlled demolition, because of the media psyop, where they want to let out some blood. They want to get beyond this by taking some abstract responsibility and muddying the waters. So difficult situation. If you were advising the White House on how they should navigate this, I mean, what would your advice be?
Well, right now, a lot of damage has been done, unfortunately, because really accountability needs to be had on the media. They're the ones who propagated this on behalf of the White House. And so when you reward basically Jake Tapper, which is insane, I would rather have them giving the audio to North Korea, let alone us, who they owed it to in litigation and broke working in good faith with them to get it out. But they just basically rewarded the institutional legacy media and the people who are really the enemies. And President Trump calls the fake news enemies of the American people. And I don't think he'd be happy to hear that his staff gave the enemies of the American people a tape to sell their book about their lies to the American people. It just doesn't make sense. But what do you do going from here? I think if I were the White House or President Trump, and who am I to advise him, it's that he cannot be more clear. He wants to see these people prosecuted. I mean, I get we're only 100 and so many days in, but how many times can the president call this out and not see his administration jump on it? And it's not going away. You look on social media, everyone is waiting for the accountability. And this is example number one.
It's not going away, Mike Howell. We know because you and Oversight Project are going to stay on it, and you're going to bring us all the updates right here on the mandate. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more on Capitol Hill right after this. Well, this July, the global summit of BRICS nations is happening in Rio de Janeiro. Now, this is the bloc of all the emerging wannabe superpowers, including Russia, China, India, Iran. And they're going to meet with the goal to displace the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. And they're calling it the Rio Reset. As BRICS nations push forward with their plans, the global demand for dollars will decrease, and that will bring down the dollar value in your savings account. So it's not going to happen overnight, but the Rio Reset in July marks the pivotal moment when BRICS objectives move from theoretical to inevitable reality. Now, if learning to divest your savings in gold is right for you, go ahead and contact Birch Gold Group and see how they can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. You can claim your free info kit on gold by texting my name, Jill, to the number 989898. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers. Let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no obligation info kit by owning gold before July in the Rio Reset. Text Jill to 989898 today.
It is absolutely essential that Republicans unite behind the One Big Beautiful Bill and deliver on President Trump's agenda. There is no time to waste. Americans gave Republicans a once-in-a-generation opportunity to course-correct our country over many wrongs over the past 4 years. And Americans are counting on Republicans to work as hard as President Trump is in this White House every day on Capitol Hill. Send this legislation to his desk as soon as possible for his signature.
So you heard it there from Caroline Levitt. It looks like the big, beautiful bill just squeaked through the House Budget Committee, but not without some serious side eye from fiscal conservatives. Their warning is this isn't the win it is being sold as. So let's bring in Rebeka Zeljko with more, because Rebeka, you wrote about this for theblaze.com. So what are some of these main concerns right now that we're seeing from conservatives with this bill?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, this bill just barely made it through the committee last night. On Friday, it was actually first taken up for a vote, and you had that group of fiscal conservatives that actually prevented the bill from advancing, citing, just as you said, they're skeptical about the spending and just the budget in this whole reconciliation package. They think that it's far too. It just spends way too much, and it doesn't cut enough. Now, it's important to point out that when I spoke this morning with some of the House leadership, they did say that across all the 11 committees that they met all of their targets, their spending targets, and their saving targets. And so there's a bit of a disconnect there, it seems like, in terms of the messaging for the spending. But going back to that group of conservatives that actually stalled the bill initially, the only reason that the bill actually made it through the committee last night was not because they voted in favor of the bill, but because they voted present. So they weren't even voting in favor of it. They were just like, we will allow it. And the reason that is because over these last couple of days, ever since they initially stalled the vote, they spent a lot of time speaking with the speaker, Mike Johnson, and making sure that a lot of their asks were actually met. And one of the main ones was the Medicaid work requirements. Those work requirements that were supposed to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, and really make sure that Medicaid goes to those who are actually eligible and not for people who are taking advantage of the system. Those work requirements weren't actually supposed to go into effect, until 2029, which is after President Trump leaves office. I mean, it's too little, too late. And so those work requirements are now expected to go into effect starting 2026, 2027. And so that's the reason you saw a lot of those Republicans actually flip their vote and just allow the bill to advance. Another thing that's important to point out, I think, is that in the Budget Committee, they're just responsible of stitching all of the different bills from the different committees together. They can't actually make amendments. And so the reason that they voted present was because they didn't actually have a say in what they were voting on until it goes before the Rules Committee on Wednesday.
So really, this is all going to be kicked down the curb to the Rules Committee on Wednesday, and people can actually fight about amending this thing. Just big picture, what I'm fascinated by here, and I'm curious with your talk to really everyone involved, today. This was always on the White House's part, and look, I'm going to pause right here. I have friends on both sides of this, and I love them all, right? But this was always on the White House's part a matter of just pass the damn thing, right? We're going to do more later on, but just, let's just pass something, let's get it through, and then we'll work later on. And I understand, that position, because we don't want to shut everything down. Let's keep this thing going, and we'll change out the parts in the plane while it's flying. That's sort of the position on the part of the White House, which makes sense. And I wonder if everyone, it sounds like everyone in Congress doesn't really want to go with that, right? There's people in Congress saying, well, we're in charge. We need to actually make some serious changes now. Is that too simplistic, or is that an accurate depiction of what's going on here?
I think that's pretty accurate. One thing I would add, though, is the fact that Speaker Mike Johnson is tasked with passing, anything right now in the 119th Congress is pretty much impossible when you can only afford to lose 2 votes. And so you have people who are complaining about the fact that he's negotiating with SALT caucus, for example, or that he's listening to fiscal conservatives that tend to actually get in the way of many of these spending packages. And the reason is because he doesn't really have any other choice. He has to talk to all of these people and find that balancing point in order to actually get any sort of legislation across the finish line.
Well, we look through this and we see the Medicaid, money laundering scheme. You talked about this with Representative Chip Roy in your article. So what is this money laundering scam that he's referring to?
To summarize it, it basically just means that there are people who are taking advantage of a service that they shouldn't technically be eligible for, but for one reason or another, whether it's people who are illegally immigrated into this country or people who are perfectly capable of working and obtaining healthcare through other means, they're able to take advantage of the Medicaid system and actually burden other fellow taxpayers who pay into the system and unfairly take advantage of a service that's meant for vulnerable people. And so that's really what work requirements are meant to actually target and to reduce this fraud that you see in this in the Medicaid. And so that's really been the focus for a lot of fiscal conservatives these last couple of weeks, and you'll really see this discussion ramp up in these next very consequential days.
So it sounds like, last 60 seconds over to you, it sounds like more to come, and this thing is about to blow up into a much wider argument in the House.
Yeah, things are just getting started. The reason the speaker said nobody's going home for this weekend for Memorial Day is because there is a chance that this actually doesn't get done before the initial target.
I don't know if you're planning on going home, Rebeka, but I know that you'll be covering it either way for us. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, guys.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more right after this. Well, Well, this Memorial Day, you don't have to worry about what the House is going to be doing. We actually have something fun for you to do. There's a story about grit, redemption, and old-fashioned family values that's hitting the big screen. You don't want to miss it. It's from Angel Studios. You know them. They're the team behind The King of Kings, Homestead, The Sound of Freedom. Now they have The Last Rodeo, and it's an action-packed story of a retired rodeo legend who straps back in for one last ride, and he risks it all to go save his grandson. And he's the oldest rider to ever enter the arena. The movie's about healing broken bonds, facing the past, and proving that real courage means fighting for the people you love. It's raw, it's heartfelt. It might just leave you tearing up under that cowboy hat. In theaters, they're selling out fast, so you want to hurry and order your tickets now. You can go to angel.com/Jill to grab your seats for The Last Rodeo. It's in theaters starting Friday, May 23rd. Everybody should go see The Last Rodeo. Get your tickets today at angel.com/Jill. That's angel.com/Jill. Joe Biden isn't the only bad choice the Democratic Party made. They also chose a number of unpopular stances, like letting men dominate women's sports, and then end up biting them. So Chris Bedford spoke with Terry Schilling, who made great strides in the culture war in 2024. Take a look.
Joining me now is Terry Schilling, the president of the American Principles Project and a longtime friend of the show and of me, unfortunately. Terry, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So this is a big, bad week for President Joe Biden. Last week was a big, bad week for President Joe Biden as well. More things are coming out every day that are showing just how far he had actually declined. You've got the cancer diagnosis, which a lot of professional doctors are saying this is not something that came around in 100 days. This is something that grows more slowly, and when you have the rigorous testing of the president, it was probably known. Could have been for years. Prostate cancer can last forever, essentially. And you've got the Hur tapes that came out on Friday. And then tomorrow, you've got this new book coming out that reveals a bunch of insider versions of things that were painstakingly obvious to the American people from public interactions. Actually, the book really ticks me off in general because of that. I mean, we know he was forgetting the names of close aides because he did it in public. We know he couldn't walk anymore because he did it in public. We know that he was a rambling, often incoherent, would stare into space and show some of those sad symptoms that we're all familiar with from aging relatives and loved ones, that he was doing this all in public. But it seems to me that this whole conversation is deflecting from what was really wrong with the Democratic Party. There are structural issues to address here, but they were wrong on the issues, and you and American Principles Project were really leaders on talking about some of these issues. So I'd love you to go into that.
Well, thanks so much, Chris. And I do think that the Biden cover-up, and I mean, it's tough to know which one, but specifically with his health, that is the greatest crisis and scandal in American media history of all time. I mean, it is embarrassing. The average American was far more aware of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. I actually think the media totally knew. They covered it up. That's why they kept him in the basement for the first campaign and really for the entire administration. But it's disgusting, and it is a deflection. It's a deflection from the fact that the Democratic Party has embraced the wrong side of several 90-10 issues. They have embraced the transitioning of young children, where we give children chemical castration drugs known as Lupron. These are drugs that we've deemed as Americans to be too cruel for sex offenders that offend and abuse children, right? It's disgusting. But on top of that, they're saying their essential premise of the entire Democratic Party is if you're white, you're evil and you're an oppressor. If you are a Christian, you're evil and you're an oppressor. And if you're a man, you're evil and you're an oppressor. And by the way, the only way that you can redeem yourself as a man is either to join the LGBT movement or become transgender, right? It's absolutely terrible. And the Democrats, again, I will just say they've taken the wrong side of several 90-10 issues, and they shouldn't be surprised if they continue to lose elections.
So the president was almost on the wrong side. President Trump was very close to being on the wrong side of this issue. He was a New Yorker. Like a lot of these different social issues, if you don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, whether it's the impact on the brain and desires of and loneliness of pornography, or whether it's what abortion actually means and is beyond just a couple slogans, or about who uses whose bathroom, if you don't actually think about them very deeply, you just assume kind of the American live and let live attitude of who cares? I don't care what they do in the privacy of their own home. But President Trump kind of changed from that point of view over the years. Originally, he said, I don't care who uses what bathroom in the White House. I don't care about it in Trump Tower. And you spoke to him, you met with him, and you pushed him in a different direction. Was that foundation really already laid? Or what was the turning point for him?
Well, the turning point was long before I actually had the chance to brief him on the polling numbers. It actually came from the campaign trail. President Trump started talking about specifically the issue of women's sports as early as 2021. I believe it was his first real campaign event after the 2020 election. There was an event in D.C. at the Marquis Marriott that was being hosted by America First Policies Institute. And I will always remember this because I was in the room and he got his loudest applause when he said he was going to save women's sports. My mother is in Iowa. She saw him at a campaign rally at the Adler Theater there in Davenport. She said, there was actually a moment where he had bragged about the billions of dollars he had brought back to farmers through agriculture. And that got a tepid response. But when he brought up saving girls' sports, the whole room exploded. And there was a moment actually at that event where Trump noticed, he said, man, you guys are interesting. I talk about bringing you billions and billions back, but it gets oh, okay, thank you. But when I say women's sports, you all lose your mind. President Trump's a populist, right? And I think a lot of people lost the meaning of that. It means you want to do the popular will of the American people. That's what he is. And that's what he wants to do. And so what President Trump gets credit for is listening and hearing the American people and actually following through on it. He's been the most pro-family president we've had in quite some time.
You kind of think that when you reject populism, it's not a good path politically.
Yeah, that's right.
But the Democrats, it seems like, are also trying to get the mantle themselves of populism. Bernie Sanders touched on it in 2016. In that first election, I remember seeing him up in New Hampshire, and the people were roaring. I've not seen, even at a Trump rally, seen as much energy as I saw in that primary season. It's faded since. He's bent the knee to BLM. He's bent the knee on all kinds of identity politics that he refused to do in 2016. But do you see any actually rise in populism in the Democratic Party, or an ability by them to get that mantle? Or are they too strangled by these 90-10 issues?
I think frankly, I think they're too strangled by these 90-10 issues, but more specifically, they're strangled by their donor class, right? I think we need to realize that the super elite wealthy in America, the vast majority of them are very evil people. They're callous. They are the licentiousness that our founding fathers were worried about, right? The founding fathers, they weren't talking about license and liberty. They were talking about licentiousness, creating a class of super wealthy people who had no problem doing terrible things to their workers and to their fellow countrymen if they were in the lower classes. That's the elites that run the Democratic Party. And essentially, Trump kicked them all out. They're all Democrats now. The people that were destroying the Republican Party have all left. They're now Democrats. They're now at furthest right, they are Lincoln Project Republicans, are Democrats, and all the way
literally
to the
diddlers.
They literally lost. And Trump has replaced them with something very beautiful, a working class American group of people that really just love their country. They love their families. They love their local communities. They don't really spend a lot of time thinking about politics. They just love their country and want the best for it. That actually has created some problems for us, right? We've swapped out the high propensity voters in the suburbs, the wine drinking, virtue signaling suburban moms that are fine with transing other people's kids and even their own. And we've swapped them out for the white working class guys, the guys that are, building up our electrical grid and our infrastructure system. These people don't really care about politics so long as it doesn't affect them, right? Once they start coming for their kids and their religion and their guns, that's when they start showing up to the polls. So we've got a new challenge, Chris. We've got to figure out a way to turn these people out and get them to the polls and make sure they know that even if they're not interested in politics, these Democrats certainly are interested in them.
That's interesting to see that they're held captive by their donors. That was a problem for a long time with the Republican Party, is they had massive scoliosis, where the donors and the base had completely different priorities over what was going on. And I wonder how much that's starting to happen with the Democratic Party now. Certainly, not doing much for Black Americans over the last couple of years. It seemed like everything got worse for them.
Right.
And then you look at the schools, you look at everything else, you look at how it's broken down. It's a disaster. Terry, what was the polling? I read a really interesting profile on you recently. It was glowing. And remind me the newspaper?
Notice.
Yeah. Yes, that was Notice. It was an excellent piece. And it talked about some of the polling that you had done as a group that made you think that we can come back on this women's sports issue. There's been a couple elections in a row where Republicans, talking about women's sports issues, haven't won as much as they expected to. But you saw something different in the numbers, and you pitched that to the president, which ended up making probably his most effective ad of the 2024 campaign.
Well, just to be clear, Chris, the Kamala's for they, them, Donald Trump is for you ad was the most powerful election ad of all time. It was not, it's not me claiming that. That's actually the Democratic Party claiming that. In their after-action focus groups and research, what they found was that ad was seen more times by more people and was the most often remembered ad by any group of swing voters they sat down with. It was very powerful. And if you go back just to the previous election cycle, all of the same issue sets were there in 2022. Economy, crime, immigration, inflation, all of Biden's unpopular policies. All of those things were present in 2022, but the big missing piece that Donald Trump added in 2024 was the trans issue, but specifically the culture war, right? The broader culture war where Americans feel like they're being told that they're not allowed to tell their schools what to teach their kids, right? That they have no input, they have no seat at the table even. That's kind of crazy. But Donald Trump tapped into the culture war in 2024 in a way that we just hadn't ever seen, not in 2022, definitely not in 2020, and he used it to win. And the reality is that the culture war is the most popular thing going for the Republican Party. It's not even close. Men cannot become women. Women cannot become men. Sure, Americans want to live and let live. They want to treat people politely. But at the end of the day, they don't want you transing their kids. They don't want you in their wife's locker room or shower. They don't want you in their daughter's sports. If we want to live and let live, well, then you got to let us live a little bit too. So it's the most powerful thing he has.
I think people don't understand that when they talk about the culture war, is that for 10, 15 years, the right has been fighting a defensive war. You can't just ignore this stuff. They're literally in your bathroom with you. They're in your stall. They're in your daughter's locker room. Terry, where can people follow more of APP's wonderful work, which I love and full disclosure, serve on your board for?
Thank you so much, Chris. You can find us at AmericanPrinciplesProject.org, or you can follow me online at Schilling 1776, SCHILLING 1776.
Then you're excellent on social media. It's the kind of stuff that gets a man in Washington in trouble, and I love it. I'm here for it.
Thank you.
I look forward to watching your interview on Tucker, and we look forward to having you back again soon. Terry Schilling with American Principles Project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we love all of the winning. We love that men are no longer competing in women's sports. The momentum, it's definitely shifting, but we have a long ways to go. And that's why Blaze TV exists, because we need to keep pushing. We can't just stop here. We have all the great reporting, all the stories that the corporate media won't touch. But when you subscribe, you're not just watching Blaze TV, you're standing with a movement. And it's just $8 a month when you use my code BNT at checkout. So go to blazetv.com/BNT right now. Use that promo code BNT to save $20 off an annual plan. Let's keep winning together. Blaze TV, unfiltered, unafraid, on demand.
He's sharp, he's focused, he's bright.
I don't have any concerns, and that's from personal interactions.
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
The best Biden ever. Well, that was a lie. So I asked you on X, who do you think was actually running the country during Biden's administration. Let's start with Dalton and get right to it. George Soros was running the country through the only competent member of the Biden cabinet, Antony Blinken. That's an interesting one to start out with. He was very, very prominent and made himself very well known in the administration.
Blinken certainly was competent in a dangerous way. I very much agree with that part of it. I mean, Blinken was adept at maneuvering within that White House, and but he's not the only one. He's not the only one.
He's not the only one. Eddie replied something that a lot of people put in the responses today. Obama. He did what he said he wanted, a way to be a puppet master. That's a good one out there.
Yeah, so this is something that near and dear to my heart as well. It was astounding that no one talked about the fact that Obama was politically active in a way that was historic. If you remember, not that long ago, every president after they left the White House, it was kind of a thing in America, a code of honor. You went out and you just didn't respond. You just kind of did your own thing. Your time had gone and you let others, enter the front stage. And it's a purposeful thing. Hey, I'm not involved anymore. I'm not actively involved in politics. Obama repeatedly violated that principle, said he needed to be involved and quietly was involved. And the crazy thing about it was the media said almost nothing about all the cars going in between his home in Colorado and D.C. and the White House. And they didn't say anything about all the visitors constantly streaming through in his home in New England. So very true. There's a lot to that.
Elisa puts out a lot of names for us to choose from: Obama, Rice, Soros, and wouldn't be surprised if the Bush rhinos were involved. Bush was very friendly with Obama. Now, I mean, we're still here in Texas. We still have to deal with some of the Bush rhinos. We know exactly what she's talking about.
Yeah, there's certainly a uniparty. That's absolutely true. And it's interesting to me that, our audience is hip to this fact that Obama was, and his people like Susan Rice, who was there for a significant amount of time, were all playing ball within this White House. And I would suggest that, though, as we heard from Mike Howell earlier in the show, there are also many senior staffers who were involved in this, who must have been coordinating with each other to run the country while Biden was incapacitated.
Well, today's responses are brought to you by Strange Encounters. If you're looking for something bold and thought-provoking and rooted in truth, check out Rick Burgess's brand new series, Strange Encounters. It's streaming now on Blaze TV and YouTube. Now, this isn't ghosts or Bigfoot. It's about the real spiritual battles that we face every day. And Rick dives into the unseen world through a biblical lens. He's equipping you with the truth and courage for the fight. Now, it's powerful, it's timely, and it's something that every believer needs to hear. That's Strange Encounters. You can watch it now on Blaze TV at blazetv.com/BNT to get that $20 off your subscription, or find it wherever you get your podcasts. Now, a strange encounter would have been if we went through and saw Joe Biden on the street, if we saw him on his bicycle when he was out in Delaware falling off. He couldn't even be trusted at that point in time. Yet the people in the administration still thought it was a good idea to put this senile old man out there in front of the public, in public view all the time. And that just goes to show you the problem with the bureaucratic state, that we can't go through and have a president for 4 years, and then everybody comes out now and says, oh yeah, like we kind of knew the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great point, Jill, and I think it's something we all need to think about, because a lot of people, normal people, good Americans, would think normally, in normal times, that's impossible. At some point, if the president isn't really the president, if the president is senile, if the president can't perform his job, surely his cabinet and everyone around him would realize the danger to the country, regardless of political or partisan affiliation, and they would invoke the 23rd Amendment. They would say, this guy, he has to step down. There's, the nukes are in play. Like, we can't have someone who is incapacitated in this office. But here is what I want you to think about today. We live in a society in which these institutions can continue to go with a mere figurehead. Really, you could put an actor right into the White House, and they could be president for 4 years. You could do the same with every cabinet head. You could do the same, frankly, with every member of Congress. Some would say over half of them already are this way. They're influencers. They're influencer candidates. They go out and make you think that they're a hero, and you believe them because you want heroes, and they say the right things on camera. But you know who can say the right things on camera? Any actor. This is a problem that goes back to the time of the ancient Greeks, who realized that in democracy, the biggest danger was that people would fake virtue. They would fake expertise. Someone could come into town and pretend to be a doctor, right? An actor can pretend to be a doctor on TV. And you think, hey, this person's legit. Politicians do this all the time now. TV, the modern media, allows them to do it. And what makes it possible is the large bureaucratic structure that actually runs things. This should be very alarming to every American. What just happened for the last 4 years should be very alarming to every American, Republican or Democrat, and here's why. How do we have a system in which someone can get away with this, with being senile, the commander-in-chief, for this long, with no one blowing the whistle, allowing this to go forward, with a host of people running the country? So all of you, when you ask, who's running the country? Well, the blob is. It's not one person. It's a whole host of institutions that all sort of move in the same direction and are perfectly fine with having figureheads in charge who aren't really in charge. That is a major problem, and it shows that we have structural reform. It shows that the original Constitution is not the reigning law of the land right now, that we have structural, deep reform that we need to perform on this system, to operate on it, to ensure that we have an actual executive, an actual commander-in-chief moving forward, and that this can't happen again.
It's such a joke that they were going through in the mainstream media and talking about, oh, we need to maybe invoke the 25th Amendment. I'm sorry, you think that Joe Biden was actually out there running the country at any point in time to go through and say, oh, well, now we need to maybe remove him as president. I'm sorry, he was never actually the president. If this is what we're dealing with right now, you don't hate the mainstream media, the legacy media, enough. If this is what they were willing to do the entire time, and now they're going to go out and get rich off book deals that they're putting out and say, oh, but we're going to be on the right side of history. Look, we wrote the book about it. Yet you're too little, too late. This is still a story about the legacy media in my eyes as well.
Yes, because the legacy media are mouthpieces for this administration. They don't speak truth to power. They speak for power. They never get out in front of power. They never take a risk. You always know that they're saying what's actually safe for them to say. And what was safe for them to say was that Biden was A-OK, and they did it like little puppy dogs, like good little servants. They bowed to their masters, and they told everyone what they were told to say. So, of course, they're going to try to come out now and do damage control by saying, oh, yeah, we kind of screwed up. Well, I didn't really quite screw up like the other people, but yeah, this is what the media did. They cannot get away with it. I don't think they will. I think this is sort of a last gasp for the legacy media. They're already tanking numbers-wise, trust-wise. So now they're trying to save face. And I don't think that they'll be able to. But the thing is, moving forward, we're going to need a new media. This is the last card they have. How do they make money off these books? Well, we still have access, so we can write the actual story because we know all the people involved. That's like the last card they have to play. That won't be true moving forward. But we're going to have deep structural change to make sure that this can't happen again. This is impossible. And we need to do that. We need a real media, which you're going to help us build, which we're building every day here. And we're also going to need reforms to that administrative state.
We've seen them stroll out Joe Biden for a couple of the official interviews that he's done recently. Do you think that we see Biden anymore in interviews?
Only if he's bedridden and in very poor shape for sort of the sympathy vote. That's the only way we're going to see him moving forward. But you will see some of that probably before he dies, just so you all feel bad.
Let the man live his life. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.